The ballroom glittered with chandeliers that cast golden light over marble floors, crystal glasses, and tables adorned with rare wines. A string quartet played softly in the background, their music drowned now and then by bursts of laughter from a circle of men gathered near the grand staircase. They were the city's elite, heirs, tycoons, and men who believed money could bend the world to their will. At the center of them stood Ethan Hale, the most arrogant of them all. Tall, immaculately dressed in a tailored suit, and flashing the kind of smile that masked cruelty as charm, Ethan thrived in these gatherings where wealth was both shield and weapon. "Let's be honest," Ethan declared, swirling his glass of champagne. "For me, marriage is nothing more than business. Love. Compatibility. Please. Give me a contract, a trophy wife, and the deal is sealed." His words drew approving chuckles, but one of his closest friends leaned in, eyes glittering with mischief. "You think you could marry anyone? Anyone at all? Even, say, a poor fat woman who has nothing to offer?" The group erupted into laughter at the audacity of the question, but Ethan's smirk never faltered. Instead, he raised a brow, as if the very idea was a challenge worth savoring. "Anyone," he repeated with confidence. "I could marry the most unlikely woman in this city, and within weeks, she would be mine. Money opens doors. Charm seals the deal. It's really that simple." "Prove it," another voice cut in, louder this time. "We'll make it interesting. You marry one such woman, not a model, not a socialite. Someone poor, ordinary, and yes, fat. If you succeed, we'll all pay up. If not, well, let's just say your reputation won't be as untouchable as you think." The men roared in approval, raising their glasses to the wager. Ethan bowed slightly, as though receiving a crown. He was intoxicated not by the wine, but by the thrill of the game. To him, it wasn't about the woman he would choose, it was about proving himself untouchable, invincible. But beyond the shimmering lights and laughter, fate stirred silently. In that very moment, with one careless bet, Ethan had set into motion consequences he could neither predict nor control. The cruel game was about to become the story of his life. Lily Bennett's world was small, but filled with quiet dignity. She lived in a tiny apartment above a bookstore, the kind of place where the walls carried the faint scent of old paper and dust. Her mornings began with the aroma of freshly brewed coffee, not for herself but for the steady stream of customers at the corner cafe where she worked. She was the kind of woman people often overlooked, plump, plain in her loose dresses, with a soft round face that held a permanent kindness in its eyes. Her life was modest. After long shifts behind the counter, she often carried a bag of leftovers to her elderly neighbor, Mrs. Harper, or stopped to help children from the building with their homework. She was known in her neighborhood not for beauty, not for status, but for her unwavering generosity. Yet, behind her gentle smile was a loneliness she rarely admitted, even to herself. Every so often, whispers and subtle insults about her weight cut deeper than she let on. Strangers assumed she lacked ambition or worth simply because of her size, and though she brushed it off with grace, their words lingered like faint bruises. It was during one of her late cafe shifts that Ethan Hale first noticed her. He had stopped by with his friends, a group far too polished for the little shop. They ordered expensive drinks, their laughter filling the small space. While his companions hardly gave Lily a glance, Ethan's gaze lingered, not with admiration, but calculation. She was, in every way, the perfect candidate for the cruel game he had promised to win. Poor, overweight, ordinary, a woman no one in his world would ever expect him to choose. When their eyes met briefly as she handed him his coffee, Lily offered her usual warm smile. To her, he was just another customer, though strikingly handsome in his sharp suit and effortless confidence. She felt a brief flutter in her chest, quickly buried beneath the certainty that someone like him belonged to a world far beyond hers. Still, when he returned the next day, and the next after that, her heart betrayed her with hope. Lily had no idea that his interest wasn't genuine. Ethan wasn't drawn by her kindness or her quiet strength. To him, she was simply the embodiment of the dare, a pawn in a bet designed to entertain wealthy men with nothing better to do. But as he leaned on the counter and asked her questions about her day, as he lingered a little longer than necessary, Lily believed she had finally met someone who saw her. For the first time in years, she let herself dream. For weeks, Ethan became a regular at the little cafe, transforming Lily's quiet days into something she had only read about in romance novels. He always arrived with that disarming smile, polished charm dripping from every word. He brought her flowers once, small daisies wrapped in paper that she clutched against her chest as if they were roses. He asked about her dreams, her childhood, even her favorite books, questions no one else had ever thought to ask. At first, Lily resisted the warmth blooming in her heart. She told herself it was impossible, that a man like Ethan could never truly be interested in her. Each time he called her beautiful, she would glance away, cheeks burning, certain he was only being polite. Years of quiet insults had carved deep insecurities in her, and she often wondered if he could see through her smiles to the doubt beneath. But Ethan never let the mask slip. He doubled down with sweet words and thoughtful gestures, each one chipping away at her walls. Soon she found herself laughing with him, anticipating his visits, and feeling a strange, delicate joy that made her heart ache with both hope and fear. She wanted to believe him, even though a voice deep inside warned her to be careful. Then came the night that changed everything. Ethan invited her to dinner at an upscale restaurant, so unlike the humble diners she usually visited. The glittering chandeliers, the soft music, and the watchful eyes of strangers made her feel out of place, yet Ethan never left her side. He poured her wine, listened intently, and treated her like she was the most important woman in the world. When dessert arrived, he suddenly stood, the room falling silent as he pulled a small velvet box from his pocket. Gasps echoed around them as he went down on one knee. Lily froze, heart pounding so hard she thought it might stop altogether. "Lily," he said with a dazzling smile, "will you marry me?" The cafe waitress. The poor, overweight girl. The woman who had never been noticed by anyone important, now being proposed to by a millionaire in front of a room full of strangers. Her breath caught. "This can't be real," she whispered, trembling. She saw heads turning, whispers starting. A few guests smirked, others shook their heads. Somewhere in the corner, she swore she heard someone chuckle, "He's joking, isn't he?" Doubt clawed at her chest. Was this a cruel trick? Could someone like Ethan truly want her? But then she looked into his eyes, those striking eyes that seemed to promise the world, and her defenses collapsed. With trembling hands and a voice barely above a whisper, Lily said, "Yes." The room erupted in applause, though beneath the claps and cheers, she could still hear the snickers. She ignored them, clinging to Ethan's hand as he slipped the ring onto her finger. For the first time in her life, she allowed herself to believe she was chosen, worthy, and loved. She didn't know the cruel truth, that she was only the centerpiece of a bet. The wedding was nothing short of a spectacle, exactly as Ethan intended. He spared no expense, ensuring every detail screamed wealth and grandeur. The venue was a sprawling estate surrounded by fountains and marble columns, decorated with towering crystal vases filled with rare orchids. A string quartet played softly as guests in glittering gowns and tailored suits arrived, their jewels sparkling under chandeliers worth more than Lily's entire childhood home. For Lily, the day felt like stepping into a dream she had no business being part of. Her dress, though simple compared to the glitzy fashion around her, was chosen with care. The satin clung softly to her curves, and though she felt self-conscious about her body, she smiled shyly whenever Ethan's eyes met hers. To her, it seemed as though he truly admired her, and that gave her courage. But the whispers were impossible to ignore. As she walked down the aisle, heads turned not with admiration, but with judgment. "She doesn't belong here. How much do you think he paid her to marry him? She looks like the help, not the bride." Some guests didn't bother hiding their smirks, their laughter disguised as coughs. The cruel words stung, but Lily kept her gaze on Ethan, who stood at the altar looking every bit the devoted groom. His tuxedo fit him like a glove, his confidence radiating as he held out his hand for hers. To the crowd, his smile looked like love. But inside, Ethan was only playing his part, savoring the victory of proving his friends wrong. As the ceremony began, Lily's heart swelled with hope. She imagined a future filled with love, breakfasts together in the sunlit kitchen, quiet evenings spent holding hands, children running through the halls of their home. She clung to these dreams, letting them shield her from the sneers and ridicule surrounding her. The vows were spoken with practiced ease. Ethan's voice carried across the room, full of charm, as he declared his love and loyalty. Lily, trembling with emotion, whispered hers with sincerity so raw that a few guests shifted uncomfortably in their seats. It was clear she believed every word she said, even if many in the room did not. When the priest finally announced them husband and wife, applause filled the air. Ethan leaned down and kissed her, a picture-perfect moment for the cameras. Lily closed her eyes, her heart racing, and for a fleeting second, she felt like the happiest woman alive. But beneath the applause, the sneers lingered. Many guests exchanged knowing glances, convinced this marriage was a farce that would never last. And though Lily was blissfully unaware of the cruel bet, her new husband's eyes flickered, just for a second, with something cold and calculating. To the world, it was a wedding of contrasts, wealth and poverty, arrogance and innocence, cruelty and hope. To Lily, it was the start of a fairy tale. To Ethan, it was nothing more than a game. The honeymoon glow faded far quicker than Lily imagined. In the first weeks of marriage, she poured herself into being the wife she thought Ethan deserved. She cooked his favorite meals, decorated their mansion with flowers she carefully arranged from the local market, and waited up late each night with warm tea, eager for him to come home. But Ethan's attention was elsewhere. He often brushed past her kindness with a distracted nod or a dismissive thanks. Nights stretched into early mornings as he spent his time with friends at exclusive clubs and high-profile parties. When Lily asked if she could come along, he would smile thinly and say, "You wouldn't enjoy it, it's boring business talk." Alone in their palatial home, Lily began to feel like a guest rather than a wife. The silence of the marble halls was suffocating, echoing her doubts louder than words ever could. The cracks widened when she accidentally overheard a conversation one night. Ethan's friends had come over, their laughter spilling down the corridor. Lily, carrying a tray of drinks to be polite, froze just outside the lounge when she heard her name. "Can you believe he actually went through with it?" One of the men chuckled. "Married her. All for a stupid bet." Another chimed in, voice dripping with sarcasm. "She probably thinks she's living some fairy tale. Look at her, she's not a trophy wife, she's the punchline." The laughter that followed pierced through Lily like knives. Her hands trembled, nearly dropping the tray, and she quickly set it down on a table before retreating silently to her room. Tears stung her eyes as the cruel words replayed over and over. The bet. The bet. The bet. When Ethan finally came to bed hours later, she pretended to be asleep, her back turned to him. She wanted to ask, to demand the truth, but fear clenched her heart. What if everything she suspected was real? What if his love had always been a cruel joke? Still, Lily tried to push her doubts aside in the following days. She told herself that maybe his friends were exaggerating, that Ethan had chosen her because he saw something in her no one else did. She clung to every small kindness he showed, when he kissed her cheek before leaving, when he brought her a necklace after a business trip, when he smiled and called her darling in front of others. Those fleeting moments of affection felt like lifelines. Yet the seeds of doubt had been planted, and they grew quietly within her heart. Every whisper of laughter, every dismissive glance, every late night out without explanation watered them. Lily began to see the cracks behind the glamour of her new life. And while Ethan basked in the admiration of his circle, convinced of his own cleverness, Lily's world was beginning to shift. The woman he thought would remain naive forever was slowly opening her eyes to the painful truth that hid beneath the surface of her marriage. It was supposed to be a normal evening. Lily had decided to surprise Ethan by preparing his favorite dinner, hoping to bridge the widening distance between them. She hummed softly in the kitchen, arranging candles on the table, convincing herself that love could still grow in the cracks of their marriage. But as she carried a tray of glasses toward the lounge where Ethan and his friends gathered, her footsteps slowed. Their laughter echoed through the grand hallway, sharp and mocking. "She really thinks he loves her," one voice snickered. "The way she looks at him, it's almost pathetic." Another chimed in, louder, almost proud, "Ethan won the bet fair and square. None of us thought he'd actually go through with marrying her, but here we are. A millionaire with a poor, fat wife, what a joke." The tray slipped from Lily's trembling hands. Glasses crashed against the polished floor, shattering into countless pieces. The noise silenced the laughter, and Ethan's friends glanced toward the doorway. Embarrassed, she quickly bent down to gather the shards, but her vision blurred with tears. Ethan strode over, irritation flickering in his eyes. "Lily, what are you doing?" he hissed, trying to mask his tone in front of his companions. Her lips quivered. "A bet," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "Tell me it isn't true, Ethan." The men exchanged awkward glances, suddenly fascinated by their drinks. Ethan's mask slipped. He forced a laugh, tossing an arm around her shoulders as if it were all harmless fun. "Darling, don't take it so seriously. They exaggerate. It was just a little game, a joke among friends." But Lily wasn't laughing. "A joke?" Her voice broke, trembling between disbelief and devastation. "Our marriage, my love for you, you made it into a game." Ethan sighed, pulling away. "You're too sensitive. Always overthinking things. Can't you just enjoy the life you have? Do you think anyone else would have married you, given you this?" He gestured around at the lavish mansion, as though her worth could be measured in walls of marble and chandeliers. His words sliced deeper than any rumor ever could. Her chest tightened, breath ragged as the truth crashed over her. Every whispered insult she had ignored, every dismissive glance she had excused, it all came together now in brutal clarity. She wasn't a wife to Ethan, she was proof of his arrogance, a trophy he flaunted to mock her and win the approval of his shallow peers. Lily's hands balled into fists, her nails pressing into her palms. For the first time, the tears streaming down her cheeks were not only of heartbreak but of awakening. She saw him now, not as the charming man who swept her off her feet, but as a cruel stranger who had gambled with her dignity. "I may be poor," she whispered hoarsely, "and I may not look like the women you flaunt, but I deserved better than to be your bet." Ethan smirked, dismissing her pain with a shrug, but he failed to notice the fire igniting in her eyes. Though her heart was shattered, a quiet strength began to take root within her. It was the birth of something Ethan never anticipated, Lily's determination to rise above his cruelty and reclaim her worth. That night, after Ethan dismissed her pain as if it were nothing, Lily lay awake in their cold, oversized bed. The chandelier above her glimmered like a cruel reminder of the gilded cage she was trapped in. Her tears had dried, leaving only a raw ache in her chest. She realized something with startling clarity. She had allowed herself to be defined by Ethan's arrogance, by his friends' sneers, by society's shallow judgments. No more. Lily sat up, a decision hardening inside her. She would no longer live as a victim of a cruel bet. She couldn't change the past, but she could reclaim her future. The next morning, when Ethan left for a weekend golf trip with his friends, Lily stood before the mirror. She looked at her reflection. The woman staring back at her was bruised with self-doubt, but not broken. Beneath the softness, she saw resilience waiting to emerge. For the first time in months, she didn't see only the weight she carried. She saw a body capable of change, a mind capable of learning, and a heart capable of enduring. She began small. Each dawn, while the mansion still slept, she slipped into the home gym Ethan had never once used. At first, she could barely last 10 minutes on the treadmill. Her legs ached, sweat drenched her body, and her breath came ragged. But each day she returned, pushing a little further. Slowly, her body responded, not just growing lighter, but stronger. Her transformation wasn't only physical. In the quiet of the evenings, she devoured books about nutrition, health, and mindfulness. She taught herself how to cook nourishing meals, replacing the empty indulgences of Ethan's world with wholesome, balanced dishes. As she chopped vegetables in the kitchen, she felt a sense of control blooming inside her, control she hadn't felt in years. But Lily didn't stop there. She wanted more than just strength in her body, she wanted strength in her mind. Late at night, under the dim glow of a desk lamp, she began studying business and finance. She enrolled in online courses secretly, using money she quietly set aside from her small inheritance. With each completed module, each concept mastered, her confidence grew. She kept her progress hidden. To Ethan and his friends, she was still the docile wife they mocked. She let them believe she was oblivious, even as her quiet resilience was shaping her into someone they would never recognize. Every insult fueled her determination. Every sneer became a stepping stone. Sometimes, exhaustion threatened to pull her back into despair. On those days, she reminded herself of the moment she overheard the truth of the bet. That wound became her fuel, her fire. Weeks turned into months, and Lily's transformation deepened. Her body was leaner, her posture straighter, and her eyes held a spark that hadn't been there before. More importantly, her heart was no longer tethered to Ethan's approval. She wasn't just surviving anymore, she was becoming. And though no one else knew it yet, Lily was preparing for the day she would stand tall, no longer as a pawn in Ethan's cruel game, but as the woman who rewrote her own story. Months passed, and the quiet seed of determination that Lily had planted began to bloom into something undeniable. At first, the changes were subtle. Her clothes fit differently, her steps carried a new lightness, her eyes no longer avoided her reflection in mirrors. But as weeks melted into months, those subtle shifts grew into something extraordinary. The woman who once slouched through crowded rooms, afraid of whispers and cruel stares, began standing straighter. She carried herself with a grace that was impossible to ignore. It wasn't just the weight she shed, it was the burden of humiliation, the chains of self-doubt, and the constant need for approval. She was free, and the world was beginning to notice. Lily's wardrobe transformed. Gone were the oversized, shapeless dresses she once wore to hide herself. Instead, she chose elegant, well-tailored outfits that highlighted her best features. For the first time, she allowed herself to explore color, emerald greens, royal blues, and deep burgundies that made her radiant skin glow. When she entered a room now, people didn't see the poor fat woman Ethan married. They saw someone striking, someone magnetic. Her voice changed too. Where she once mumbled apologetically, she now spoke with clarity and authority. At community gatherings, people leaned in to listen when she shared her ideas. At charity events, she carried herself with poise, her words infused with sincerity and quiet strength. The timid cafe worker had evolved into a woman who commanded respect without raising her voice. Along the way, Lily met people who would shape her journey further. One was Mrs. Harper, a retired entrepreneur she met at a charity gala. Mrs. Harper, impressed by Lily's thoughtful conversation, invited her to lunch. Over steaming cups of tea, she began teaching Lily about leadership, networking, and influence. People will try to define you by your past, Mrs. Harper said. But it's your present that rewrites your story. Those words took root in Lily's heart. She also crossed paths with Daniel, a financial advisor who admired her curiosity. He guided her as she refined her knowledge of investments and business strategies. Under his mentorship, she began building connections in the business community, connections that opened doors to possibilities she had never imagined before. Meanwhile, Ethan was too distracted by his vanity to notice. Obsessed with his reflection in society's shallow mirror, he chased younger women, lavished money on extravagant parties, and wasted nights away in champagne-fueled indulgence. To him, Lily remained the quiet background of his life, invisible and unimportant. But society was no longer blind. Guests at parties began whispering when Lily walked past. At first, it was surprise, is that really Ethan's wife? Then admiration. Her name began circulating in social circles not as a subject of mockery, but of intrigue. People spoke of her transformation, her elegance, her newfound presence. And Lily, she noticed. Not with vanity, but with a calm assurance that she had earned every glance of respect. For years, she had been the punchline of a cruel bet. Now, she was becoming the story people couldn't ignore. Every day, she grew stronger, not just in body but in spirit. The woman Ethan had chosen to humiliate was no longer his victim. She was becoming radiant, unstoppable, and undeniable. And though Ethan still hadn't realized it, his world was shifting beneath him, because the wife he once mocked as his greatest joke was rising to become his greatest reckoning. Ethan had always believed himself untouchable. For years, his wealth had insulated him from consequences. Money smoothed over scandals, charm disguised his arrogance, and his circle of so-called friends reinforced the illusion that he was invincible. But illusions rarely last forever, and Ethan's was about to unravel piece by piece. It began with his investments. In his hunger for quick returns and flashy wins, Ethan had thrown money into high-risk ventures, dismissing the cautious advice of seasoned investors. Fortune favors the bold, he had laughed, ignoring the warning signs. At first, the losses were small, easy to dismiss as temporary setbacks. But soon, the numbers became impossible to ignore. Deals crumbled, projects collapsed, and his empire began bleeding money. The same colleagues who once praised his daring now whispered about his recklessness. Then came the betrayal. Ethan had always surrounded himself with men who laughed at his cruel jokes, who drank his champagne, and who mocked Lily at his side. But loyalty among parasites is fleeting. When his financial troubles deepened, those very friends abandoned him, some even seizing opportunities to profit from his downfall. One particularly humiliating blow came when a trusted associate secretly cut a deal with Ethan's rival, leaving Ethan exposed and outmaneuvered. For the first time in years, Ethan felt the sting of isolation. He would arrive at exclusive parties expecting the usual adoration, only to be met with thinly veiled smirks or, worse, indifference. The whispers were no longer about his wealth but about his decline. And nothing bruised his ego more than realizing that Lily, his once timid, quiet wife, was gaining admiration in the same circles where he was losing respect. In desperation, Ethan turned back to her. He expected her to greet him as she once did, eager, submissive, grateful for the crumbs of affection he offered. But the woman who stood before him now was not the same Lily he had married. When he barked orders, she met his gaze with calm composure. When he tried to dismiss her thoughts, she spoke with authority that left him stunned. Their dynamic had shifted. At charity galas, it was Lily who drew the attention of the press, her elegant presence commanding admiration. Ethan would stand beside her, plastering on a smile, but the cameras angled toward her instead. In one particularly painful scene, a reporter asked Ethan about his failing company, then turned immediately to praise Lily for her recent community project. The contrast could not have been clearer. Ethan's arrogance, once his shield, had become his downfall. His temper flared in private, but his outbursts only revealed his weakness. When he sneered at Lily's new confidence, she didn't shrink, she simply walked past him with dignity, leaving him stewing in his own bitterness. The world that had once mocked Lily was now mocking him. The world that once applauded his cruelty was now applauding her resilience. Each passing day, the gap widened, she was ascending, while he was spiraling downward. For the first time, Ethan began to feel the ground slipping beneath his feet. And though he refused to admit it out loud, a terrifying thought haunted him in the silence of his crumbling mansion. Perhaps the cruel bet he had made wasn't a victory at all. Perhaps it was the beginning of his own destruction. The ballroom shimmered with chandeliers and the clinking of crystal glasses, but on this particular night, no one was watching the decor. All eyes shifted as the grand doors opened and Lily walked in. Gone was the timid, self-conscious woman who once clung to the edges of society events, hiding behind Ethan's shadow. In her place stood a vision of strength and elegance. Her gown, tailored to perfection, highlighted her graceful figure, her confident stride turned heads. Conversations faltered mid-sentence, gasps rippled through the crowd, and even the seasoned socialites, accustomed to beauty and wealth, found themselves staring in awe. Lily didn't need to demand attention, her very presence commanded it. She greeted people warmly but with poise, her smile radiant yet reserved. For once, she was not being judged for her size or her modest origins, she was being admired for her transformation, her aura of power, and the quiet dignity that radiated from her. Ethan, standing near the center of the room, felt the shift immediately. He had come to the event bracing for another night of whispers about his failing ventures. But now, those whispers weren't about him, they were about her. His first instinct was to claim her triumph as his own. He hurried to her side, grasping her arm with a forced smile. "Darling, you look incredible," he said loudly enough for others to hear, hoping to remind the crowd she was still his wife. But Lily only offered him a polite nod, not the adoring gaze he once expected. The photographers who swarmed toward them weren't interested in Ethan's words, their flashes followed Lily, cutting him out of the frame more often than not. As the night unfolded, the murmur of admiration gave way to another, more dangerous kind of whisper. A small group of Ethan's former friends lingered near the bar, trading stories about the infamous bet, the cruel dare that had once seemed amusing to them. But in the glow of Lily's triumph, their laughter felt shameful, grotesque. Their words spread like wildfire through the crowd, passed from ear to ear. "Did you hear? He only married her as a joke. A bet, can you imagine? Disgusting. And look at her now, more than he ever deserved." Ethan began to sense the shift before he heard the words directly. The curious glances aimed his way were no longer flattering, they were sharp, condemning. When a business associate approached him, Ethan straightened, expecting a cordial exchange. Instead, the man shook Lily's hand with respect and barely acknowledged Ethan before walking away. The humiliation deepened with each passing minute. Where once Ethan had been the star of such gatherings, he was now reduced to clinging at the edges of Lily's radiance. He tried to laugh, to brush aside the whispers as gossip, but no one laughed with him. Even his charm, once his greatest weapon, seemed hollow. Lily, meanwhile, carried herself with quiet grace. She did not expose him publicly, nor did she seek revenge with her words. She didn't have to. The truth was unfolding without her lifting a finger. Every admiring glance she received, every approving nod from society's elite, was a condemnation of him. By the night's end, Ethan stood alone, sweat gathering at his collar, watching as Lily was escorted out by dignitaries and entrepreneurs eager to partner with her. For the first time, he wasn't the man people wanted to be seen with. He was the man people avoided. And in that glittering ballroom, surrounded by laughter and music that no longer included him, Ethan experienced a truth harsher than any insult. He had lost the bet. Not because Lily had failed, but because she had risen. The whispers in the ballroom had become thunder. Everyone knew now. The cruel truth of Ethan's bet had spread from one end of the room to the other, poisoning his reputation with every retelling. But the moment that sealed his fate came when Lily, radiant and unshaken, stepped forward. The room fell silent as she took the microphone meant for the evening's host. Every pair of eyes, once mocking, now reverent, turned toward her. Ethan lunged forward, his hand outstretched to stop her, but she slipped out of his grasp with effortless composure. "I think," Lily began, her voice calm but edged with steel, "it's time everyone hears the truth, from me." Gasps rippled through the crowd. Ethan forced a strained laugh. "Darling, this isn't necessary. People gossip." She turned on him, eyes blazing. "Don't interrupt me, Ethan. You've had enough time to perform." Her words cut deeper than any shout. Ethan froze, his smirk faltering as Lily lifted her chin. "Yes, it's true," she continued, her voice steady. "I was once a poor, insecure woman who believed in fairy tales. I believed in love. And Ethan here," she gestured toward him with measured disdain, "made me his bet. His entertainment. His joke." A collective murmur swept through the guests, faces hardening with disgust. Ethan's protests died on his lips. "But let me tell you what he didn't realize," Lily pressed on, her tone growing stronger, richer. "He thought I was the fool. That I was unworthy of his world. That I would stay small and broken while he laughed behind my back. But the truth is," she paused, her eyes sweeping the room, "he was the fool all along." Her words rang out like a verdict. "Because while he wasted his life chasing approval, I found strength. While he gambled with cruelty, I built resilience. While he tried to humiliate me, I became a woman who doesn't just survive, she thrives." Applause erupted, hesitant at first, then swelling until it filled the entire hall. Ethan stood stiff, his face pale, eyes darting from one condemning glare to another. He opened his mouth to defend himself, but not a soul listened. His charm, his arrogance, his status, none of it mattered anymore. Lily set the microphone back on its stand with finality. She turned to Ethan one last time, her expression a mixture of pity and triumph. "I may have walked into this marriage as a bet, Ethan. But I am walking out of it as something you'll never be, free, strong, and respected." And with that, she walked away. Her gown shimmered in the light as she moved through the parting crowd, every step an act of liberation. Guests stepped aside with admiration, some even reaching out to squeeze her hand in support. Ethan was left behind, sweating and trembling under the crushing weight of his own disgrace. No one reached for him. No one spoke to him. He was alone, surrounded by the ruin of his own making. The final blow hadn't come from anger, but from truth. And as Lily disappeared into the night, it was clear to everyone, Ethan had lost everything, while she had won herself. The morning sun spilled across the glass windows of Lily's new office tower, a symbol of everything she had built with her own hands. What had begun as quiet self-study and determination had grown into a thriving business empire, cafes, fashion lines, and investments that bore her name proudly. People no longer whispered about her weight or her past. They spoke of her brilliance, her courage, and her rise from betrayal to triumph. She walked through the lobby, where employees greeted her with genuine smiles and respect. This was her world now, one not borrowed from a man's name, but earned by her own strength. At business events, she was sought after for advice and admired for her poise. The same society that had once mocked her now held her in the highest regard. She no longer carried the heaviness of humiliation, but the lightness of freedom. As for Ethan, the once proud millionaire, he had slipped into obscurity. His failed ventures, his arrogance, and his downfall had made him a man society was quick to forget. Where once his name commanded attention, Now it was little more than a cautionary tale whispered behind closed doors. Lily never looked back. She didn't need revenge anymore. Her life itself was the proof that she had won. She surrounded herself with people who valued her heart and her vision, not her appearance or her past. Standing at the balcony of her penthouse one evening, the city lights glittering beneath her, Lily smiled. She had been tested, broken, and mocked, but she had risen beyond it all. She was never just the bet, she was the lesson.